The idea of corporate governance is relatively new, and it comes about because there is, in the modern corporation, a separation between the ownership of the company and the management of the company. So if you look at the small businesses that many of you work for, you can see the owner and the manager are the same person. So there's really not an issue. But when you have this separation between ownership and management, you potentially have some issues. And a corporation has some unique features with the idea of the ownership of the modern legal corporation. And one of the key things is it offers limited liability to the owners. So for example, today we see that J.C. Penney is in a lot of trouble financially, but as a shareholder of J.C. Penney, you don't have anything to worry about other than the fact that you could lose your complete investment in the company. But it's not a matter that they can come back to you and say, well, J.C. Penney went bankrupt and you, Mr. Shareowner, are going to have to kick in an additional $100 million to pay off all these debts. You don't have that liability. You get to reap the profits when the company does well, and you also don't have any daily involvement with the company. You're not having to run it. You simply put your money in and hopefully make more money. To run the company, you hire the management team, and they may have limited or even no investments in the company. And so you can see there's this potential difference that you have this relatively detached set of owners and this relatively autonomous with limited liability managers. What's to say that these two people work together and do the same thing? And that's where the idea of a corporate board comes in. They are responsible to the share owners, and their job is to monitor the actions of management. And you see how that, in theory, completes the loop. So we have this thing called agency theory that says the problem is the interests of the management, which would be the agents in this case, the CEO and the staff, may not line up with the goals of the owners or the principals, and they may have different risk preferences. And so the idea of the board, the modern theorization about agency theory, is that the board makes sure it aligns the goals and the risk preferences of the CEO and the company managers with that of the owners. One of the areas where this is most frequently operationalized is in pay, although it does have also some issue with perks. For example, does the company have a business jet, and does the CEO get to use it like it's his own private airliner, and does it take him to his or her vacations or just business trips? What kind of appointments comes or other perks come with being the CEO? Does the company pay for country club memberships? Does it pay to send him or her off on all these trips that look a lot more like vacations than working matters? So it's not just the pay, but the pay tends to get the most attention. So because of agency theory over the past 20 years, you've seen a lot more complexity in the pay packages of CEOs. You have to understand the difference between stock options, restricted stock, and bonuses. Bonuses are just what they sound like. The CEO picks up whatever the board awards as a bonus. A stock option says the CEO has the potential to purchase this stock sometime in the future at a specified price. And so the idea is, if the stock option is set right and the CEO does their job, then the stock price will rise, which matches the interest of the share owner. And the CEO will, at that future point, exercise their option to buy the stock at this price when their option specifies the stock at this price. That's different than restricted stock. Restricted stock is where they actually receive the stock, but they're not able to sell it for a period of time. So you may award a CEO $1 million worth of stock, and they have to hold it for 5 years before they can sell it. Well, if they don't do a good job of managing the company, in 5 years that stock is going to be worth a lot less, and they won't have gotten the amount of money. So now you get some issues. One is when you're setting the bonuses for or setting the goals for CEO goals of what sort? What do you tie the performance to? And let me give you an example from the textbook of how difficult this topic can be. The textbook criticized Ford Motor Company for awarding Alan Mulally in 2007 a bonus because Ford lost a lot of money. Mulally is significant because he's the first outsider to have ever run a car company. His roots were at Boeing and in the commercial airplane sales and manufacturing business. Well, I think Mulally actually deserved that bonus in 2007. If you look at the amount of money Ford lost, it lost a lot less than its American counterparts. Their stock price went down a lot less than did their American counterparts. And if you go back and trace it back, part of the reason Ford is in the position it is today is because of the decisions Alan Mulally made in 2006 and 2007. So do we tie it, does the CEO only get a bonus if the shareholders make money? Or does he or she deserve a bonus if they make more money or lose less money than all their competition did? So what do you tie the performance to becomes an issue. Something else to consider is this idea of CEO tenure, shorter now than it ever has been. So if a CEO knows there's a good chance I'm only going to be able to ride this bucking bronc for 3 or 5 years, they're going to be motivated to make as much money as they can during that period of time, because if you are a CEO that is fired for poor performance, it's very hard to get a job after that, certainly one at near the level that you did before. There's a lady named Carly Fiorina who ran for political office a couple of years ago in California, former CEO of HP, that fits that to the T. She never went back into another high-paying job. So they have this feeling of, I better make a lot of money while I'm here because I might not be here very long, and if I get fired, my employment potential is going to be vastly reduced. And then that gets into the idea too of, well, how much credit does the CEO deserve? And we're going to talk about that in a later lesson, but that will drive to a certain extent how much money you think they should make. And if you are in a business where the CEO is making big decisions, big bets, then maybe they deserve the big money. Another issue is, how much does the CEO make versus the other senior officers, say the CFO, the chief operating officer, the chief marketing officer, whatever. In a lot of companies, that pay differential is huge. In some companies, that pay differential is relatively slight. Well, what do you think? What's fair there? Again, since often it is the CEOs whose neck is on the line, maybe it's appropriate that they make substantially more. Incidentally, it's interesting when you read the articles, you would think that people would always want to step up and be the CEO. But you sometimes see these C-level officers who understand that, hey, this is particularly if the company's in trouble and they're looking to a CEO to revitalize it. If I think I'm going to keep my job with the new boss, maybe I don't want to be the boss. Maybe I'm good making my $500,000 a year, thinking I can do this for another 8 or 9 years, versus reaching for the brass ring, taking the CEO job, knowing that in 2 years I could be unemployed. Now you have to ask yourself, counterintuitive, is all this pay for performance even fair to the officers of this company? Here's why you want to think about that a little differently. Now let's look at the board of directors. How much of their wealth is likely tied up in that particular company? Probably a relatively small amount, because they have the right to diversify in a lot of different stocks with a lot of different investments. What about somebody that was not rich when they came into the job, but stepped into the CEO position? Their salary is tied up in one company, and a lot of their stock may be tied up in that company as well. And so they are literally all in to a much greater degree than any other entity. So is that even fair to them? Now here's the interesting thing. It would seem obvious that this idea of tying pay to performance is a good thing, and that this will help us get good governance. The research doesn't support it. They don't find that cases where CEO pay is closely tied to performance, that their firms tend to perform better than CEOs who do not have as tight of a tie. And part of that is because maybe the CEOs are just motivated to do good things for their company, because he or she is proud to be the CEO, and they're proud of the company, and they want to be a good steward. Even though you won't see these theories get as much traction because they're not economically based, stewardship theory says you hire people because they're going to do a good job for you. So I've hinted at this idea of the boards. Come back with me in just a minute and we'll talk more about the role of boards in this arrangement.